In this video, we're going to discuss the iOS 15 updates for the Frameworks app, and there's really only one, right? Again, these pretty simple apps in the beginning, there's not much there, but I want to take time to showcase the new button system in iOS 15. As you can see here in the lower right, we have our Learn More button that we customized. To refresh your memory here, I'm going to go to the Views, Buttons, this AF button, right? We have a text and we're customizing with all these modifiers, and there you go. Well, Apple introduced a new system that gives you a lot of the default looking Apple buttons kind of built in out of the box. As you can see here, there's some pretty basic styles where you have the plain, gray, tinted, filled. There's a nice WWDC video that I'm going to link to, really specializes in UI kit for that video, but there is a Swift UI equivalent, and that's what we're going to talk about in this video. So again, the whole point here, big picture, if you want Apple looking default buttons like they belong in an iOS app, this is probably the way to go, the new way that I'm about to show you. However, if you want your own super crazy custom buttons that you want full control over, you should probably stick with the old way that we've already done with AF button. I shouldn't even call it the old way. I should just call it the more customizable way, because again, the new way just basically gives you Apple looking buttons. All right, so let's talk about that. So this AF button, where do we use that, right? We use that on the framework detail view, right? This Learn More button down in the lower right. And then here on line 30 is where our button is. And you can see for our button, we're using the label of AF button where we pass in the title, right? That's what this AF button is, right? Pass in the title, and that's what we give it. Okay, refresher over. So now there's some modifiers on button itself, but we still have to give like some content to the button here. So I'm gonna comment this out. And that's another thing I should point out. Like, I'm not going to go back and delete AF button even though we're not using it, strictly for learning purposes, so you can go back and see the difference. You know, in a real app, if you were converting to these buttons, you should probably delete and get rid of your old code, right? It's called zombie code that's around that you're not using. And over the lifetime of a project, that really adds up over time. So you want to make sure you're keeping that under control so your code base isn't so cluttered with like, are we even using this anymore? And it's confusing and you're not sure. So once you delete stuff, get rid of it. For the most part, there's always exceptions, of course. But anyway, I'm going to keep it in there for now. Framework detail view. Now, what I want to put in here is, let's resume this so I can see this in real time. You could just put a text if we wanted to keep the same exact look, but I'm going to add a little spice to it, right? We're going to put a little image in there. So this is going to be a label as well. And make sure you do system image name, not just image name, because remember, system image name is what gives us the SF symbols. If you had your own custom image, then you would have to load it into your project and use that. System image name is what we want to do. So again, this is still going to be Learn More. The label is what the text is. Again, same as what we had on our AF button. System image, the SF symbol, is going to be book.fill. And I just know that that's SF symbols. You can look it up. I did that to save time, but I'll zoom in on our simulator here. You can see that's our basic Learn More button. We haven't added any styling to it, right? So that's why it looks like that. And I put that little book there for the Learn More. If you want a different image, explore, have at it. Now, the new modifiers for the button is where the new system comes into play. So the first modifier we want to add to the button is .button style here, right? And then we get bordered, bordered prominent, borderless, plain. So this plain is what you see there. Bordered, we'll do there. You see the default we get. Okay, come on, preview. Oh, see, bordered is only available in iOS 15 or newer. This is what I was talking about in the overview video about how a lot of the new Swift UI stuff requires iOS 15. So let me go to the project. Forgot to do this in the beginning. Project here, iOS deployment target, make that iOS 15. And if you're wondering, how do I, add this new stuff, but still, support less than iOS 15? Well, that leads to a little bit of messy code, because I'm not going to go into it now, but there's these conditionals where you can say, like, if this device is on iOS 15, run this code. If it's on iOS 14 and below, run this code. So you're kind of like duplicating your code to do things twice. That's why most apps, like, they won't adopt the iOS 15 stuff until iOS 15 is the minimum deployment target. So a lot of iOS developers, they see all the new iOS 15 stuff, but they know they can't even use it for another year or two. But luckily for us, we're in an educational environment. We're going to support minimum iOS 15. So Apple Frameworks, iOS 15. And then now that we're supporting iOS 15, do a Command B to make sure everything's all good. Okay, good to go. Back to our framework detail view. This error is no longer there. And then now our bordered button, if you can see, has a slightly gray background on the border. That is the default. Now we can style that, but that is one style of button. That's that gray style. You may have seen buttons like this, again, all over Apple's default apps. But let's customize this a little bit. So we can do .control size. So you see it's kind of small. Again, large, mini, regular, small. We'll go to large. You can pick that. Now you can see our button got bigger. I'm going to click off of it to get rid of that red square, but now you can see what our button looks like. So you can customize this a little bit, but you're getting that Apple look and feel out of the box. We didn't have to mess with corner radius. We didn't have to do anything like that. And now we can customize the colors a little bit. So I can do .tint and then .red. That'll give us the red tint, and I'll get off it, so get rid of that red box. But you've seen these buttons in iOS too, right? Where you have like the 50% opacity of the same color background with the same color as the foreground of the letters. Now, the reason these buttons work well is due to contrast ratio. Usually when you're using the same color, you're gonna get a good contrast ratio for people that are colorblind. You can imagine like a yellow button with white letters. Those white letters are really hard to see, so some colors in white don't really go well. This is a nice way to ensure great contrast ratio. And that's the bordered style, right? So we saw the gray background and then the tinted background, but how do we get the button that we had, right? Well, that would be bordered prominent, right? And now we get that. You see, and the tint is red, that's the background. Our foreground color is white by default, but now you can see we get a button that looks like how we had it. And if you do want to change the foreground color, say you have some weird color scheme, right? You can do .foreground color, we'll say .yellow. And the foreground color will be your text. As you can see, now our button looks like McDonald's, right? But you can see how you can customize that. Now, if you do want to customize the shape a little bit, you can do button border shape, hit dot, so you get automatic capsule. So capsule would be, as you can see here, that typical capsule look. You've seen that a lot of the places. Or you may have noticed, instead of dot capsule, you can do dot rounded rectangle, and you can determine the corner radius. I don't know, we'll just put 20 in there, right? If you do have a specific corner radius, so you do have the possibility to customize it a little bit. But you can see just with these few modifiers, we can, do everything we need to do. And again, that is to get these Apple looking buttons. And I'm just going to comment it out so you see this in the code here, but I'm commenting out the border shape. I'm going to go back to dot bordered because this is the look I like. This is how I'm going to make like all my buttons from here on out in my apps. Like I really like that tinted look. Now, anytime you have a bunch of modifiers on a button like this, I like to abstract that away into like a custom modifier. This was just your introduction into this button system. We're going to deal with that custom modifier in the appetizers app when we do that for our buttons there. But this was the introduction. Highly recommend checking out the WWDC video. I will link below. And that's all we're going to do in the Frameworks app because again, there's not much here, but this was a good opportunity to learn about buttons.